Apple just made an announcement that'll hit your wallet harder than you'd expect. The company's raising prices on almost everything: iPhones, iPads, Macs, and here's the thing nobody's talking about. The increase has nothing to do with better hardware. It's because Apple's asking consumers like you to pay for its artificial intelligence infrastructure. Think of it like this: you're essentially paying an AI tax on your electronics. Every time you buy a new device, a chunk of that money goes straight to building server farms and AI training facilities that have nothing to do with your device's actual performance. And we are talking real money here. An average price increase of $200 to $300 per device. That's billions of dollars Apple's extracting from its customer base every year, all under the guise of hardware improvements. The company's basically saying, we need to compete with Nvidia, Google, and Microsoft in the trillion-dollar artificial intelligence race, and you consumers get to fund it whether you want these AI features or not. This is the moment where big tech's obsession with artificial intelligence directly impacts your bank account. And that's just the beginning of this story. To understand why Apple's raising prices, you have to understand the artificial intelligence arms race that's consuming Silicon Valley right now. Every major tech company, Nvidia, Google, Microsoft, Meta, Amazon, is in a frantic competition to build the most powerful AI systems possible, and it's costing them insane amounts of money. Google spent roughly $50 billion on data centers last year. Nvidia's building manufacturing plants that cost tens of billions. Microsoft has committed to spending $150 billion on artificial intelligence infrastructure over the next few years. That's not innovation anymore, that's a financial arms race. The stakes are enormous because whichever company controls the best artificial intelligence will control the next decade of technology. Every smartphone, every cloud service, every search engine, they all depend on artificial intelligence being faster, smarter, and more capable than the competition. So companies are throwing money at the problem in ways they never have before. The problem for companies like Apple, they're not primarily hardware manufacturers anymore. They're now artificial intelligence companies that happen to make phones. And artificial intelligence infrastructure doesn't come cheap. Data centers run 24/7, consuming vast amounts of electricity. Training models requires specialized chips and computing power that costs thousands of dollars per hour. Here's where it gets interesting. So here's what Apple's actually doing with your money. The company is building what they call Apple Intelligence, a suite of artificial intelligence features that live partly on your device and partly in Apple's cloud servers. Sounds reasonable, right? Except here's the catch. Apple's had to invest billions in the computational infrastructure to make this work. They're building neural processing networks that can handle millions of requests simultaneously. They are training language models that can understand context and nuance. They are developing secure data centers where your AI interactions are supposedly private. All of this requires specialized hardware, specialized graphics processors, custom chips, enormous quantities of cooling infrastructure. And all of it costs money, lots of it. According to industry estimates, Apple's artificial intelligence infrastructure investments could reach $50 billion over the next few years. That's the equivalent of purchasing every smartphone in the United States twice over. For a company that previously spent less than $3 billion annually on research and development, this represents a fundamental change in how the company allocates resources. The price increase to consumers. It's Apple's way of moving that cost from shareholders to customers. Instead of taking a hit to profitability, Apple's essentially passing the bill directly to you. And here's what really catches people off guard. Let's talk specifics, because this is where the story gets personal. The iPhone 16 Pro Max, Apple's flagship phone, just hit $1,000. That's a jump of $150 from the previous generation. The iPad Pro, now starting at $1,200 instead of $999. The MacBook Pro, prices jumped by $200 to $400 depending on configuration. For every single product, Apple's justification is the same: you're paying for artificial intelligence features. But here's what's actually happening. Most of those artificial intelligence features aren't exclusive to new hardware. Apple Intelligence works on iPhone 15 Pro and newer. It works on iPad Pro with the M-series chip. It works on MacBook Air. The hardware you already own is capable of running these features. So the price increase isn't about enabling new capabilities on older devices. It's about funding Apple's artificial intelligence infrastructure investments. The company's being transparent about this, at least in the fine print. They are saying, we need to build out our artificial intelligence capabilities to compete in the next era of technology, and these price increases fund that investment. But most customers aren't reading the fine print. They're just seeing their favorite products cost significantly more. And that's exactly where the tension begins. Here's where it gets interesting though. Apple's not the only company raising prices to fund artificial intelligence. Microsoft did the same thing with Surface devices and Windows licenses. Google's raising Pixel prices. Even Samsung's charging more for Galaxy devices. The difference? Most of those companies are more transparent about it. Microsoft explicitly calls out artificial intelligence features in their marketing. Google's advertising Pixel artificial intelligence features as reasons to upgrade. But Apple's taking a different approach. The company's framing price increases as necessary investment without clearly telling customers what they are paying for. Compare this to Nvidia, which is brutally honest about artificial intelligence costs. Nvidia's H-series graphics processors cost $20,000 because they're explicitly marketed as artificial intelligence infrastructure. You know exactly what you're paying for. You know those graphics processors will train models, run neural networks, power data centers. Apple's approach is more subtle. The company raises prices, mentions artificial intelligence in a couple of keynote slides, then lets customers figure out the connection themselves. The result? Frustration. Customers feel like they're being squeezed without understanding the full picture. And that brings us to the real stakes of this moment. This is where the implications get serious. We're watching a fundamental change in how big tech companies think about consumer electronics. It used to be simple. You paid for hardware, and the company made money from selling that hardware and services that ran on it. Artificial intelligence changes that equation. Now companies are asking consumers to fund infrastructure investments that benefit the entire company ecosystem, not just your individual device. For Apple specifically, this creates a pricing ceiling question. How much more can they charge before customers start switching to alternatives? Android phones from Samsung, Google, and OnePlus are generally cheaper. If Apple's price advantage disappears, some customers will defect. But here's the broader implication. If it works for Apple, every major tech company will follow. Microsoft will raise Surface prices further. Google will charge more for Pixels. Samsung will accelerate price increases. We're potentially looking at a future where consumer electronics cost significantly more than they do today, not because the hardware improved, but because companies need to fund trillion-dollar artificial intelligence infrastructure. There's also an equity question here. High-income consumers can absorb these price increases, but lower-income consumers might be priced out of upgrading entirely. Older technology widens the gap between what rich and poor consumers can access. And that's a genuinely troubling trend worth paying attention to. So what are your actual options here? First option, hold onto your current device longer. If you've got an iPhone 15 or newer, you can run Apple Intelligence. There's no technical reason to upgrade right now. You can stick with your current device, save money, and let the market settle. Second option, switch to an alternative. Android phones from Google, Samsung, or OnePlus offer similar artificial intelligence features at lower price points. If Apple's pricing bothers you, Android devices give you a way out. Third option, be strategic about upgrades. If you're going to upgrade anyway, consider refurbished devices or previous generation models. An iPhone 15 Pro does almost everything an iPhone 16 Pro does, and it's cheaper. Fourth option, and this is important, demand transparency. When you buy Apple products, ask directly about where the price increase comes from. Push back on the artificial intelligence justification. Companies respond to customer feedback. If enough people ask why they're paying more for artificial intelligence infrastructure, Apple will need to explain itself more clearly. Fifth option, diversify your tech ecosystem. If you've been all in on Apple, consider using Google Workspace, Android devices, or other alternatives for some tasks. It reduces your vendor lock-in and gives you negotiating power. These aren't flashy solutions, but they work. Here's what this moment really means for you. Big tech's obsession with artificial intelligence is moving from a data center problem to a consumer wallet problem. Companies like Apple are asking you to fund infrastructure investments you didn't ask for and might never directly benefit from. This is just the beginning. As artificial intelligence becomes more central to every tech company's strategy, expect more price increases. Expect more vague justifications about artificial intelligence investment. Expect more subtle attempts to pass infrastructure costs to consumers. The question isn't whether this will happen, it's how far companies will push before customers push back. Apple's betting that consumers will accept higher prices because artificial intelligence is the future. They might be right, or they might be starting a change that brings down their premium brand positioning. What to watch for next? Whether other major tech companies follow Apple's pricing playbook, whether regulators start asking questions about these price increases, and whether consumers start voting with their wallets by choosing cheaper alternatives. The artificial intelligence arms race isn't just about who builds the best models, it's about who can convince consumers to pay for it. And right now, Apple's testing that theory with your money.